Welcome to Risk Engineers Talk Governance. In this episode, due diligence engineers Richard Robinson and Gaye Francis discuss formal safety assessments. We hope you enjoyed the chat. If you do, please give us a rating and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. If you'd like more information on R2A's work or have any feedback or topic ideas, you can head to the website r2a.com.au.
Hello, Richard.
Welcome back, Gaye.
Welcome back. Welcome to another podcast session. We're going to talk today about formal safety assessments and what they are and what they mean. I think this is sometimes the bane of our consulting work that we do.
It certainly is.
And I guess articulating what we think that a formal safety assessment is may help others to sort of when they're putting it together, to think through some of these elements.
Yeah, because they pop up in different places, and a lot of people don't call it that. But some legislation, for example, the ESMSs in Victoria, calls up formal safety assessments. And you might
So that's
recall
the electrical industry.
Well, you might recall that when we did the functional safety assessment of trains, that was a formal safety assessment too. So it pops up in a number of places, and we do rather find that people, let's just say there's a difference of opinion what constitutes a formal safety assessment. It's an aspect of a safety case, but it's meant to be the core aspect. Now, I don't know how you wanted to actually do this, but I sort of was going to explain what formal actually means by jumping back to a bit of 19th century philosophy.
You can do that, Richard. You don't get
In the
many
19th century,
opportunities.
the philosophers used to break philosophy into three parts. They had formal philosophy, natural philosophy, and moral philosophy. Formal philosophy is what these days we call reason, or, it's reason, logic, I guess. Natural philosophy, that was to do with what we these days call science, what we in R2A tend to call the laws of nature, to try and distinguish it from the legal concept of natural law. But it's how the world, the natural material, time, space, universe actually operates. So gravity is 9.8 metres per second squared, and other things that Gaye perhaps doesn't wish to recall. And then there's moral philosophy, which is the way the world is supposed to be. And that's normally split into two parts, practically. And when we've been looking at the way we sponsored David Howarth, the Professor of Law and Public Policy from Cambridge, is the lawyers spell out socially how that should be, and the engineers tend to spell out technically, in terms of managing the laws of nature, how it's supposed to be. Now, if you don't have this understanding of what the formal actually means, just a logical and reasoned argument, which you would think would be self-evident, but you review a lot of formal safety assessments, and they're not logical and reasoned, are they?
No, and they can be not so concise either.
Yes. So did you want to summarise that?
No, I think when we're looking for that formal safety assessment, that logical and reasoned argument, we want to have those core credible critical issues of concern. So in safety terms, it's the things that can kill and maim, which we've always said. What are the current controls in place? And if we go down the SOFARP option, which is what the WHS legislation or HS legislation requires, what are the further controls that could be put in place? And then what is your reasoning for doing or not doing those particular further practical precautions?
And that's the reasoning part.
And that's the reasoning part. So often when we get an assessment, a formal safety assessment or FSA, often it's almost just their, inverted commas, risk register. So it's got what the issue is, what some of the mechanism are, and then a whole lot of...
Well, they did just characterise it by risk, not looking at criticality, which just drives us crackers.
Correct.
The logical argument sort of said how bad can it be, not what is the risk, simultaneous appreciation of likelihood and consequence, because that'll be totally misleading in safety terms.
Yeah. And then they list a whole lot of what they say are controls, but when you actually look through the controls, many of them are procedures, policies, and
Not actually what you're going to do to actually stop this particular nasty thing from actually occurring.
Correct.
And then they haven't therefore logically connected the quality system to make sure that particular control is sustained. And sometimes they do, because they talk about it as a critical control to deal with a critical hazard.
Yeah.
And then they are heading in the right place.
Correct. And I think that's why we favour the use of the threat barrier diagrams, isn't it? Because you can spell out what your issue of concern is. The barriers or controls are easy to see in a document or in a diagram, and then you've got the consequences at the end. And so then if you list those quality control elements at the bottom, then you've got that logical, reasoned argument.
Well, you can spell out what the current controls are, what the further possible controls are, and where they would act in terms of the hierarchy of control that a court would find logical, not what our regulators are doing. And we've been writing separately about that to the Marie Boland. We'll see if that has any effect.
Yeah.
But then it's actually a reasoned, logical argument. I suppose it always mystifies us because you've probably noticed that when we write a report, what surprises most people is its brevity, or possibly pithiness is perhaps a more accurate statement.
Concise. Can we use concise?
Yeah, we can use concise. But normally dealing with a particular issue does not require scads and scads of paper. If you've got scads and scads of paper, you're probably confused and missing the point. And the one thing you can't do is use it to a target level of risk and safety, which, again, somebody putting a formal safety case argument together or a formal safety assessment using a target level of risk and safety, you're kidding yourself. It means you really haven't thought it through.
Yeah, it's really that being able to present a clearly thought through argument, isn't it? And you're right, it doesn't need to be long. We get these safety cases that are hundreds of pages long, and the bulk of it is almost summarised in 10 to 20 pages.
Yeah, or even less. I mean, remember what you're trying to do, because it's going to be, if that bad thing happens, it will be subject to legal scrutiny. So it's got to make sense to a court. And that court won't be trained in the laws of nature. It'll almost certainly only be trained in the laws of man. And so that means that argument has to survive that kind of scrutiny. And it's that robustness of the court process. I mean, I can have a lot of opinions about the court process, and we were talking before about, the law is much too important just to be left up to lawyers, which I have to say we keep hitting that point, and the lawyers keep making that point to us. But if the lawyers don't understand the laws of nature and really are just relying on the experts, technical experts, to explain the laws of nature, that really does mean that there's a bit of a gap in the way in which human beings and our society actually make decisions.
I think also coming back to the formal safety assessment is you really want to see what controls they're testing for or precautions.
What further controls they're testing for.
And that's often the element that is missing in the FSA that we have seen.
Correct, and that's the thing the courts will test for.
So especially when it goes to a regulator or it's part of a bigger safety case, they're asking to say, we understand that you've got these controls in place. These
typically the ones that are standards, most of them, they've complied with the regulation.
Yes.
But the question was, have you tried to do more than just the regulation or standard? And that's the bit they're not testing for properly.
Yeah. And it's okay not to do some of those things, but you've got to have an argument as to why you haven't done it, and that's where you would expect to see it would be in the FSA formal safety case.
The one that always makes
this
puzzles us, I suppose, is the REFCORs, the ground fault neutralisers for high voltage 22 kV circuits in Southeast Australia and so forth. The only jurisdiction that's actually adopted it is so far Victoria, and the reason is because the AER, the Australian Energy Economic Regulator, basically said, no, you can't do it. We won't let you have the money to do it.
Well, it won't be funded through the regulator now. They could decide that in some locations they really do need to do it for bushfire.
Well, that's correct, but they won't get extra funding for that purpose. That will be their decision.
Yes.
And so therefore their loss of profit to achieve that outcome.
But as a board, they could make that decision, but they need to document that's the reason that they're not going to do it, and they have considered it in all of their circumstances, because all of this is contextual, remember? So everyone's FSA is not the same thing.
Well, even in Victoria, I mean, the reference got put into the high bushfire-prone areas, but that means somebody decided which was high and which was low bushfire, and that's not actually a binary distinction. It's obviously a graded thing, and therefore you'd probably find the fact that you can have an argument in some areas where that's exactly correct, and that would depend on the actual circuit layout and all sorts of things.
But then there were other organisations that said we've only got a small high bushfire consequence area, we're going to underground ours.
Yes,
because that was better for them, or that was their reason, logical argument. Going forward.
Particularly if you've only got an isolated high bushfire consequence area, just undergrounding, and you might just say, well, enough, we'll just underground those ones and not worry about the REFCOR. That's correct.
And I think that feeds into some of the questions we're being asked around these formal safety assessment is what is the context? And I think that context is changing. So this is not just put on your shelf, do it once, put it on the shelf and forget about it. This is something that you've got to keep revisiting, and whether it's on milestone occasions or when things change, or whether it's on an annual or every couple of years basis, but these things have to keep evolving. And we're certainly not seeing that in some of the formal safety assessments that come through us.
Yeah, it's usually the previous one recycled.
Correct. And can we update it accordingly?
Yep.
So just be careful of formal safety assessments. For us, it's that logical, reasoned argument.
That would survive post-event legal scrutiny.
And I think the key element that we see missing is that consideration of what the further practical controls are.
Yep.
Or possible controls are, and the argument as to why you are or aren't going to do something. I always say that I think it's more important to document why you're not going to do something compared to why you are going to do something.
Yes.
And then say when you're going to revisit that, because technology becomes more available, more robust, more reliable.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us, Richard. Hope everyone found that interesting.
Thanks, Gaye.